Around the entire perimeter of the inside of Monas on the bottom is dioramas of the entire history of Indonesia, dating all the way back to the Paleo-Mongoloid era, the Neolithic age, which is really nice that it's translated in English. The translation is not one-to-one, but it's close. It's close. Every step from here all the way around the perimeter until you get to here, and that's modern day. So each one of these goes through entire centuries of Indonesian history. So I'm not going to show every single one of them. I will show some of my favorites, at least, as I'm walking around. Look how intricate they are, too. Really cool. And there's so many of them. This entire wall, that entire wall, that entire wall, and this entire wall. How crazy is that? We're going all the way back to the kingdoms of the old kingdoms of Indonesia. And then here we have Buddhism. This is the first time that we see Buddhism in these panoramas, in these dioramas, whatever they're called. And then some people will recognize this, Gajah Mada. There's a plaza here called Gajah Mada Plaza. There's also a mall called Gajah Mada here in Jakarta. This was a guy, actually. That's Gajah Mada. Isn't that so cool? Look at that. They're very intricate. And here we have our first introduction of Islam. So we started with Hinduism right back there. And now we have Islam. Also, they have a mosque in here. And now we're starting to see the Dutch, which is a huge part of Indonesia's history. Now we got some actual bule, some Belanda, orang Belanda. Also, a thing to remember about Indonesia's history. Aceh is just a part of Indonesia, but before Indonesia was a country, all of these places were ruled by different kings and kingdoms and sultans and everything. So there were conflicts like this. The Dutch sent in troops to decrease Aceh's relations with foreign countries. Aceh was its own region. Indonesia was not a country yet. And every one of these slides is is another war with the Dutch that was going on for hundreds of years. Okay, I'm gonna let this class pass me because there's a huge classroom of kids coming through. Look at all of them. Oh my god, they took over. I can't even hear myself, bro. I'm actually surprised. Usually when there's so many kids, they're surrounding me because I'm an attraction, obviously, in Indonesia in general. But they're actually involved in the history here, and none of them are looking at me. Which is so funny to me, actually, because usually I'm the center of attention wherever I go. But they're actually interested in the history. Good for them. Some of them found me. Most of them are not even looking at it. This entire group didn't even look at me. They're all looking at the dioramas. Some of them. Oh my god, there's so many of them. I'm back. What's really interesting, like I was saying before with the Achenese people, same thing here. Indonesia was not a country, so the Dutch was just trying to expand to all over what is now Indonesia. But all these people were completely different people with their own laws, their own rules, their own kingdoms. So this one, as opposed to that one about Aceh, this one is about the Balinese people, which again are completely different people. Now we know them as like united under Indonesia as a country, but before, completely different cultures, completely different religion, completely different people, food, language, everything, completely different. And the Dutch were kind of like all up in their business. All of these different cultures and these different kingdoms, the Dutch were like all over him. So this is another interesting thing. So we've seen in the first diorama, we saw, what did we see? We saw Hinduism, right? And then back here somewhere, then we saw Islam. And now here's the introduction of the Protestant church, the Christian community, when it first gets introduced to Indonesia. So you can see like slowly throughout like history, Indonesia has had the introduction of many different religions that all helped to unify the country, unify the nation. So it wasn't just like one movement, two movements, three movements. It was all these different religions that were all involved in Indonesia at the same time. Super cool. And you know what's super interesting is that it wasn't just one of these religions that was involved with the unification of Indonesia. It was multiple religions working simultaneously in the same country, or at least what would become the same country, working to unify the nation, even though the religions don't agree with each other, but they actually worked alongside each other to unify Indonesia, which is like super cool. You don't see that very often. Yeah, and it's even shown like in this government-funded museum, which is like so cool. And then to add to that, here's a movement for liberating Indonesian women from the prejudice of customary law and tradition. So crazy that this happened so long ago, right? And here's the men's mosque here. Where Islam was being brought up again, harder than before, I guess. It kind of it feels like it's skipped. That one to this one, it feels like it's skipped. It feels like there should be one in between this, because I don't know like the context of why it needed to be rejuvenated. It didn't really explain that, but here it is, being rejuvenated, right here. Boom. So this is where it starts to gain traction. People really want to actually unite as a country and actually speak the same language, because remember that all of these people come from different nations, different kingdoms, different cultures. I don't know why my camera's bugging out there. And some of them didn't speak the same language. A lot of them actually didn't speak the same language. So this was a push to unite Indonesia, not only as a nation or as a culture, but also their language too. But then here's where it gets super bad. So content warning, during World War II, the Japanese came in, the Dutch surrendered, since they were a part of the Allies. And obviously Japan was a part of the Axis. And then when the Japanese came in and occupied, they had Indonesian people just working like forced labor. And there's still a lot of remnants of the buildings and structures and bunkers and all this stuff that the Japanese had Indonesian people build for them during this time. And this was super bad period of time. This is my favorite one. This one is super impactful to me. Right after the Japanese surrendered, after the bombs dropped, the Indonesians basically realized that this was the perfect time to declare independence. And so they signed up the proclamation, was signed by the two leaders of the independent movement. Immediately after the bombs dropped, I think it's 3 days after the bombs dropped, they declared independence. And that's how Indonesia declared its independence. They used the bombs dropping at Hiroshima and Nagasaki to declare independence. As an American, we didn't even think about this being an impact, right? Like, we just think about the conflict between the Allies and the Axis. Indonesia didn't care about the Allies or the Axis, right? Because they were occupied by Dutch for hundreds of years, and then they were completely put into slavery by the Japanese for 3 years. So they didn't like the Allies, and they also didn't like the Axis. But then it turns out that like dropping the bombs on Japan was the perfect opportunity for Indonesia to declare independence, which is like a crazy byproduct that like we don't even think about, right? It's just like, it's just such a cool story. Like, it's such a cool history. So this is probably my second favorite panorama, right after the Declaration of Independence, is the Battle of Surabaya here in 1945. So this is after they declared independence. the Japanese left a bunch of arms, and the Dutch decided to come back because they were like, oh, well, the Japanese were defeated, right? So like we can just retake Indonesia, right? And the people did not heed this. For obvious reasons. You can imagine it from Indonesians' perspective. You just went through 3 years of being enslaved by the Japanese, and as soon as you declare independence and the Japanese lose the war, the Dutch, who had previously colonized you for hundreds of years, they're like, oh, let's just come back. Like, this is obviously Indonesia's ours anyway, right? Let's just come back. And Indonesia was like, no, we're not doing it this time. We're not doing it this time. So here we've gone through so many iterations of different religions, right? Being involved in the unification of Indonesia. And here we have the Catholic Church. Indonesia has a very rich history of so many different religions being involved in their unification. Like an insane amount. I don't know any other country in the world who has this many religions being involved in the unification and independence of their country. Like, this is just insane, right? And then this is cool because I've been here. The Afro-Asian Conference. I assume, I don't know. Is this the same thing that's in Bandung? I think so, right? Oh yeah, Bandung. Which is cool. The whole like street, there's a whole street called Asia Africa. And there's a whole building that I assume is this same building that this is modeled after in Bandung. Oh hey, that's where I am. I'm right there, right now. My name is Justin. I started this channel to do more than just travel. I have a dream. To change the way that we see the world. Through my journey, I hope to inspire people like you to explore more and to bring us all closer together by realizing just how small and connected our world really is. I'm just one person sharing my experience, but this journey is bigger than just me. If you want to be a part of something greater, you can support me on Patreon or buy me a coffee. Together, we can change the world. Come get lost with me. Here we have an entire War of Independence, which is very familiar.